Any final, I mean, any words before the test? I need to reach my friend. Okay, those will be noted for posterity. And let's get ready to launch. Whee! Oh! Hello everyone, and welcome back to Astrophysicist Plays Tears of the Kingdom. And today, I'm going to explain levers to you and show you how levers can be used to construct a trebuchet. So, first of all, what is a lever? Well, a lever is a long plank that rotates at least somewhat freely about some axis of rotation, which we call the fulcrum. So, here we have a plank on something it can rotate around. It can't rotate all the way, but it's at least somewhat free, so it does count as a lever. And this can be used to construct various things to test and demonstrate physics. Now, there is one quirk with this lever that makes things slightly difficult, and that is this lever has a little bit of a restoring force to it. So with an ideal lever, if you let it go at any point, it would just stay there. But with this lever, if we let it go, it goes back to this position. So if you're looking carefully, they kind of imply there's maybe some spring mechanism pulling it back. Now, they do this for the player's convenience, but not for the physicist's convenience. So this has the weight of, maybe... So, for instance, if we put the bowl just a bit out, it isn't enough to rotate, to cause the lever to rotate. This is interesting. Yeah, okay, it's just a lot of glue. So we can force it to rotate. And if we start it going over, then it's enough at a certain point where enough of the bowl is tipped past to hold it down. But otherwise, it does rotate back. So there is some restoring force here we need to keep in mind. But that's alright, we can get out the main points anyways. So, one thing that I think about equalizes it is, I think if we attach this to the outer end, yeah, there's a bit more here, but I think that's fine. So, now, as I demonstrated in previous episodes, levers can be used for a makeshift scale. If you put two different things on other end, the lever will always fall towards which of those is heaviest. So here we're showing that the bowl is heavier than the plank, at least if you pretend the restoring force is 0. And if we take the... And now, things get a bit complicated, though, when you start extending things out and don't put things at the same distance. So, for instance, the ball here and the bowl have slightly different masses. They look like they should have much more difference than they actually do, but it turns out the ball is only slightly more massive than the bowl. So, if we were to put them on the lever here, so like this, we can see that the restoring force plus the plank, or the restoring force plus the ball, is more than the weight from the plank. Now let's experiment with putting the bowl down and see when this tips over. So putting it there didn't tip it over, but putting it there does. And what if we put it even further out? If we put it all the way out there, it tips over even faster. So what we're seeing here is that how much a lever wants to rotate depends not only on how much mass is on either side of it, but how far out the mass is. This is a property that we call torque. Torque is kind of the angular equivalent to force. So if you think as force is how much you want to make something accelerate, which will be mitigated by the object's mass, torque is how much you want to make something's angular rotation accelerate, which then gets mitigated by a property we call the moment of inertia. So let's just demonstrate a bit again. So a simple force we can work with here is gravity. So when we let go, gravity wants to make everything accelerate. The force of gravity is equal to its mass times the gravitational constant, and it makes things fall. But if we think about this in rotational terms, we can also apply a torque here. So let's say we want to make the lever start to rotate. We can use the force of gravity spaced at a distance out from the lever to make it start to rotate. We apply a torque to it, it starts to rotate. And the one important thing about torque is that the strength of it is proportional to the distance out. So if we were to put the ball a lot closer in, it either doesn't rotate at all, it isn't able to overcome the restoring force, or it starts rotating much more slowly. And so we maximize the torque when we maximize the distance. And we can also increase the torque by using something more massive, such as the cube here. The cube is much more massive than the ball, so even putting it closer in, it rotates a lot faster. And when it comes back, we can put it out as far as possible as well to see how quickly it rotates. Now, also for torque, anything exactly on the center is going to cause zero torque, but in this case, the cube is so massive that even being very slightly out, which we can't really get this to exactly the center, I want us to attach there. Yeah, it very quickly overwhelms it. Let's see if we can put something else right at the center. Yeah, well, the ball isn't causing it to rotate, but the restoring force, well, yeah, we have to account for that anyways. The restoring force is still overwhelming it here, so it's hard to demonstrate that it's exactly zero, but that's the basics of it. So now let's talk about mechanical advantage. Mechanical advantage is basically taking advantage of, at least in this circumstance, it's taking advantage of torque to be able to either apply more force over less distance or less force over more distance. So let's try attaching this cube here just a bit out, and we'll put it back to rest. Okay, so our cube is holding down our dancing lever. It's only a bit out from the center, but it's a lot more massive than anything else. Can we put enough mass on this to overwhelm it? Well, we don't have enough mass to work with. The ball and cup together are still much less massive than the cube. But what if we attach them both to the far end? So I haven't tested this before, so expect this to fail. Okay, well, at least we got the plank to settle down. Adding Link into the mix. Yeah, Link isn't mass enough either. Okay. Okay, if we move the cube in a bit, and we lose everything else. Okay. Experiment unsuccessful, but if you want to see a successful experiment along those lines, you can refer to the previous episode. I'm just going to try once more with the cube in even closer and see if we can get our magical dancing lever to cooperate. And no, now we can't even attach things to it properly. Okay. So, let's just put up some equations for those who are a bit more physically minded. So, the basics of force is that it causes things to accelerate per the equation force equals mass times acceleration. Torque, which we use the letter tau for, or sometimes a capital T, is equal to the force times the distance out from an axis of rotation. So we can put these together, use a bit of algebraic substitution to get torque is mass times acceleration times distance, or torque is mad. Now, one thing some of you might be thinking if you watch the previous episode is, didn't I previously say that work is force times distance? And yes, I did. And the thing I'm kind of skipping over here is that I'm using a different definition of multiplication each time. In the case of work, we're talking about the force along the side, the parallel distance. That is, I push this forward and measure the distance it goes forward, and after that I get the work on it, which is basically how much energy I add to it with the force. With torque, I measure the force times the perpendicular distance, that is, the distance from where it's being applied to the fulcrum. So, putting this mathematically in vector notations, work is the force vector dot product the displacement vector, and torque, which is also a vector, is the force cross product the displacement vector. So I won't go into that anymore. We don't need to worry about that too much. So the trick with levers is that we can take the torque from a certain amount of force and apply it at one distance and have the result of it come out at a different distance. And because it's coming at a different distance, it applies a different force in the end. So this means we can either amplify or reduce the amount of force that's applied. So let's see if we can set up a good test. Okay, so with the cup, yeah, we can see that Link is essentially massless here. But yeah, I don't think we can do a good setup with how unreliable this lever is, but refer to my previous episode where I demonstrate how you can use 4 pebbles to lift up 6 pebbles with a lever using mechanical advantage. So the trick to how mechanical advantage works is that it comes from either the work equation or the torque equation. In the most general, it comes from the work equation, so we'll use it here. So this equation is work is force times distance, and there's always going to be a fixed amount of work you need to do. So let's say we have something attached to this end of the lever that we need to raise 1 meter. That's a fixed amount of work, but we can get that work done operating somewhere else with varying amounts of force and distance. If we want to reduce the force, we can fiddle it around and do half the force and twice the distance. Or alternatively, if we want to reduce the distance, we can use twice the force and half the distance. And either of those will successfully lift up the bull here. So that brings us to the question of what is a trebuchet and how does it use mechanical advantage? Well, a trebuchet has the goal of launching a projectile as quickly as possible using the gravity of a counterweight. So let's set up the most basic way to do that here. We'll put the ball in a cup here, and we'll set up the cube as a counterweight. Right now, the lever is acting just to redirect the force and not in for any mechanical advantage. But redirecting it is enough to launch the ball, though not very much. However, what we want is to launch the ball as quickly as possible. That is, we want it to cover as much distance as possible. Since it's light, we don't need to apply as much force to moving it, so you can think of it like we've got a force budget to spare. What this means is that we want to actually reduce our mechanical advantage. So we increase the distance that the ball and cup are from the lever. We'll put this further out at roughly 3 times the distance. Keep the cube in the same spot. The cube will be applying the same force as before at the same distance as before, but now it's at 3 times the distance out. So if we go back to our equations, we've got 3 times the distance and 1/3 the force. And since this is 3 times the distance out, since it's going around in a half circle, this means that it's going to, well, a quarter circle, sorry. It's going to cover 3 times the distance around a quarter circle. So the distance around a circle, so the the circumference of a circle is always 2 times pi times the radius, and a quarter circle is 2 pi r over 4. That partially cancels out. We get pi r over 2. So before we had the ball covering a distance of pi r over 2. Let's say this is 1, so distance of pi over 2. Now I've got it 3 times the distance out, so the ball covers a distance of 3 pi r over 2 in roughly the same time. The cube is so much more massive that it overwhelms everything else and does its falling in the same time. So essentially, the ball is covering more distance in the same time, or traveling at a faster velocity. So, if all our math checks out, when we attach the cube here, we get the ball launched much further. And this is how a trebuchet works. It sets up a counterweight close to the fulcrum, and where the projectile is launched from far off makes the counterweight much more massive than the projectile, so even when we lose mechanical advantage, it still easily overwhelms it and falls basically freely under the influence only of gravity. It pulls along the lever, and the end of the lever goes much faster because losing mechanical advantage to force means we gain it in distance. When the end goes faster, it launches the projectile faster, and we end up with the projectile getting launched at pi speed at the target. Now, this being Zelda, we're not limited to just attaching the counterweight and letting it freely fall down. We can add even more gravitational energy via the Ultra Hand and get an even bigger launch. Okay, so that is the basics of how a trebuchet works. Now, unfortunately, we can't take this lever out of the shrine to work with. I've talked a bit before about how we can use auto build to copy things and recreate them in other places, but unfortunately this lever is excluded from that. The other pieces here are, so we can take the cup out, which is great for launching things. I believe we can take the sphere out as well. So let's attach the sphere to the cup. Now, one problem with taking the sphere out is anything recreated through auto build will cease to exist if it's not connected to anything else. So we could take the sphere out connected to something else, but we wouldn't be able to break it apart and use it as a projectile. So the sphere ends up not being very useful to us. We could take the cube out for a counterweight, and it does have some advantages. It's pretty heavy and easy to stack, but it's not as heavy as other things we can use for counterweights. Boulders in particular are heavier than this, so if we want to get the maximum use out of our trebuchet and have the heaviest counterweight, so we have the most force to work with, even after accounting for a reduced mechanical advantage, we'll want to work with something as heavy as possible. So, in the end, it actually turns out that nothing we have here is the optimal material to work with. So, for constructing our trebuchet, I'm going to take us on a brief shopping tour showing you the various places that we can pick up materials. Alright, so let's go. Our first stop is in Tabantha Tundra, right next to the snowfield stable. So, one useful thing for us is these trees. Once we cut down these trees, they provide us with very long and thin logs. These long and thin logs are perfect for constructing a lever out of. Ooh, here's a long and thick one. That one's actually going to be, yeah, too heavy for us. We want our lever to be as thin as possible. Now, for copying things with auto build, we need at least two things connected together. So I'm going to make a pair of logs here connected end to end. Ooh, and they come in multiple lengths too. So let's get the longer ones. Let's see if we can get two of the long ones. Oh, looks like we got a blood moon coming. You'll have to bear with me while we wait for it. Okay, blood moon unfortunately hasn't regrown that tall tree for us, so let's see if we can get another one that gives us the longest thin log to work with. Yeah, too thick. Yeah, too short. This is like hunting for the perfect Christmas tree. You want one that's just right. Okay, here we go. Found another tall one. So let's connect these together. Now, the reason I'm trying to get the long ones instead of multiple short ones is that it allows us to minimize the points of connection we have, which are the weak points, and it also allows us to minimize the number of pieces that will go into our eventual design. Now, each of those pieces counts against our piece total, which is around 20 or 21 total pieces. So if we can use, say, 2 long logs instead of 3 short logs, we're saving pieces there that can go into other points of the construction. Now, it does look like these thinner ones are a bit thicker, so we might have to compensate with more mass in the counterweight if we start outweighing things, but I think we can work with it. Okay, so next point on our shopping list is down here near the outskirt stable. We'll go to the Tutu Shrine. Now, from here, if you look across the canyon and up, you'll see this structure. Now, up near that is basically a mini game we can participate in, which provides another interesting physics challenge. Well, I'll show you more of that in the future, but for today, we're just going to copy some materials that are used for it that will be useful for us. Okay, so it looks like the rain will be finishing soon, and then I'll be over there. And here we are. So, there are a lot of useful materials we can use here for a trebuchet, but what we're looking for is the best thing to make a counterweight out of. So, what we have here are, first of all, 2 boulders. These are quite good for a counterweight. You can attach a couple of them together, save it in the auto build favorites to copy them. But we also have these metal boulders, which are very hard to find, and as far as I can tell, they seem to be very slightly heavier than the rock boulders. So, let's attach a pair of them together, and save that in our auto build favorites. Now, let me just clear up and save that. Okay, so now we've got our lever material and our counterweight material. Next, we need an optimal cup to launch things from. So for that, we're going to head over to Kakariko Village and the Makasura Shrine as I showed you in the previous episode. So let me zip over here and I'll be right back with the cup. And here we are. So, the reason we're taking the cup from this shrine is that it comes pre-built into this combination cup and platform. This helps us limit the parts we're using, as this platform is pretty lightweight. This allows us to ascend through it and drop whatever we want to use as our projectile right into it. So we can ascend through, stand on it safely, rather than having to balance on the log and put in our projectile. And since this is all only one piece, it works less against our budget. So, let's take this out of the shrine. To do that, we attach it to really any other thing. I'm using the ball here. And just in case for some reason they don't like us taking out the ball, I'll also do it with a stabilizer, which they'll definitely allow us to take out. And we can't add it to our history here, as auto build isn't allowed in shrines, but once we get out, we can do that. So finally, let's go to our building area. I'm going to recommend the Dueling Peak stable here, so we'll head over to the Esho's Shrine. There's one more material we'll be using, but we can take that out of Zonai capsules. Oh, I was actually wrong again. It's actually 3 more materials. So the first is right here behind the shrine. It's these crates. So attach a pair of crates together. Favorite to your auto build. I already have it here, so we'll just reuse that. Let's bring along these 2 crates to start with. The next material will be regular-sized logs, so we're going to cut down a couple of trees here. We'll need 2 of these. If you want to save them in auto build just in case, you can attach them up however you'd like. Pro tip, don't make an axe out of a torch. It takes forever to chop anything down. Okay, so we'll just attach these up like that so we can save them in auto build, but ideally we won't even need to recreate any logs. So let's start getting our materials out. First, let's get our lever out with these extra long logs. Next, let's get the cup we'll use to launch. Okay, it does let us take out the ball, but unfortunately we can't get the ball on its own to use as a projectile, so we'll just have to find something else. Okay, so we'll set up the cup at the end of this lever. Then, once it's attached, we can grab the unnecessary ball, shake that off, the ball disappears, and we have the lever attached to our cup. Okay, now we have to set up the fulcrum for this to rotate around. Now, we tried this with a wheel before, but found that for various reasons a wheel wouldn't work. It just didn't have enough sticking power to stay up, and things kept falling off of it. So instead, we're going to construct our own wheel here. Now, you might be asking, how do we do that? And I will show you in just a minute. But first, we're going to set up a fulcrum point of our own by attaching 2 of these logs to either side. And in fact, we're going to be attaching them at a 45 degree angle downward. So, the easiest way to do this, I think, is to flip the lever over, and then we can attach the logs to the top of it. Oop, somehow this got flipped back. Let's put it to a place where it's a bit flatter and less likely to tip. Okay. Yeah, the ground here isn't perfectly flat, unfortunately, so we do get a bit of rolling. Let's see. That's not stable. Okay, good. Alright, now we want to attach the logs to either side of this at a 45 degree angle. Now, these logs aren't perfect cylinders, so there are going to be slight differences in how optimal this is depending on exactly how we attach the logs. So, let's try right there. Nope, that's off at an angle. This might take a few tries to get them set up perfectly. Okay, that one looks good. Okay, so we'll put the other one on at a 90 degree angle to this one. So we'll want to put it up like roughly there. And I'm just trying to line up the bottom of it. Since the bottom of this log isn't quite flat, we want it to be at the best angle for us to work with. Okay, yes, I think that's good. That's not perfect, but it should be good enough. Okay, good. So, now that we have these logs, we're going to start making our wheel. So, to do that, we're going to go to our Zonite devices and get out some sleds. We'll be using 3 of these on each side to make quarter wheels. So let me show you how this works. So we'll put one sled down, pick the log up, put it down, and attach the corner of the log to the center of the sled. Now let's do the same on the other side. Okay, yeah, those look like they're attached well. Then, to each of them, we're going to take another sled, tilted at a 45-degree angle relative to the first one, attach the front of the new one to the back of the old one. And do that once more, at a 45-degree angle to the second one, or a 90-degree angle to the first. And we have our axle. So essentially what we've done here is we've taken our axle and externalized it. Rather than having the wheel inside the trebuchet, we've put the trebuchet inside the wheel. This will still rotate around this to the extent we want. So if I demonstrate, I can pick this up, rotate it back, put it down. Actually, let me rotate around like this. And it will fall over, and the sleds actually slip quite a bit, so it almost rotates in place, simulating if we had an axle inside of it. So, Zelda won't give us a wheel that's good enough that we'll make our own. Okay, next step, we're going to be setting up our counterweight. But right before the counterweight, it's actually useful to set up something to hold this steady and later act as our triggering mechanism. And for that, we're going to be using the 2 crates we saved to auto-build. So these fit almost perfectly with the height of the 2 logs at 45-degree angles and the on top of the sled. It's just a little bit tall. So we can take the trebuchet that we're creating here, lift it up, put it on top of these crates, and attach to the center there, and it is now nice and propped up. So let's move this out here so we have a bit more room to work with. Okay, so that'll prop it up once we have the counterweight set up, so let's get to that. Okay, so the best way I've found to set up the counterweight is to try to cross over the log here. Now, unfortunately, these boulders, yeah, they don't seem to line up very conveniently. However we do it, they're at a bit of an angle, which makes them tough to build with. So things get a bit messy and hard to align. But we'll do our best here and put as many of them as possible, as central as possible, and hopefully that'll be enough to give us enough torque to overcome the torque of the opposite end and launch our projectile. So let's add on some more boulders. We'll cross these again like that. Ooh. And you can see they're already starting to overwhelm the force on the other side. So hopefully one more set will be all we need. So let's look at how things are currently balanced. It looks like things are a bit too off to the left from that angle, at least. Now they're off to the right from this angle, so we'll want to add the final boulders a bit to that side. So something like that. Oop, not quite stable enough. Okay, let's find another way to attach them. Maybe like that. Yeah, that looks like it's stable. Okay, I think this is looking good. So we've got a nice countermate, nice and close to the fulcrum. We've got a projectile launcher way far out. And if we break the crates here, crates are easily breakable with an axe, a hammer, or fire, we should be able to launch. So let's get up there and set up a projectile and see how this works. It might take a bit of fine-tuning if it turns out that we don't have quite enough torque from the counterweight, but we'll see how this goes. So, Time Bomb has about the right spherical shape. So, let's take out one of those. Set it in the cup. And get ready to launch. So ideally, we want to break both of these crates at the same time, and I think setting them both on fire is going to be the best way for that. It also allows us time to get in position to watch it fire. There we go, both on fire at the same time. Let's get a good view. Oof. And we got a nice good launch out of that. I'd call that a success. So, now that we've got our weapon of war, let's see if we can hunt down that Wizrobe, which has been taunting us this whole time. Although first, actually, it feels to me like this isn't quite accelerating as much as it could. I think we could improve this a little with a bit more of a counterweight, maybe sticking something out. So let's set up the crates first. We'll give this a try. If it doesn't work, just keep to this design, which is basically work. Okay. It's tipping over a little bit there, so we might be hitting the weight limit. Let's see if it'll be stable once we place it down. It's not breaking the crates. Did I just see a star piece? Is this gonna happen every time I record? Oh, I can't spot anything. Damn. Okay. Alright, let us line up with that Wizrobe so we're at least facing the right direction. Okay, place it down. Please don't break. I think we're good. Okay. Well, let's arm it. Alright, we are armed. Let's trigger it. And hope for the best. Ooh. Failure there. So, the problem we hit this time is that this didn't roll over smoothly. When we put the boulders out front, they ended up blocking the smooth rolling path. So let's cut off a couple of these, and instead we'll attach them much higher so that they don't prevent it from rolling smoothly. Okay, let's just set it up for a test tumble, see how this works. Okay, this does stop a bit before it gets vertical, and unfortunately breaks off a couple of the sleds, so we'll have to fix that. However, stopping just before it's vertical might actually be a bit of an advantage. The reason for that is if we're going a bit above the horizontal when we launch it, we actually end up going a bit farther. So I think I'm going to leave this as it is. Hopefully we won't keep breaking off the sleds every time we fire this. Okay, got it put back together here. Now let's set this up for another test launch and see how far we can throw the projectile. If we're putting things in just with the Ultra Hand, I guess we don't actually need the platform, though it might help if we ever plan to try to launch Link. Alright, roughly the right direction. Let's fire. Just setting off the bottom one, hopefully it'll still work. Ooh. I like the trajectory there. Missed the Wizrow, but yeah, we got some good distance. Okay. I think we have a successful design. Alright. So, with that success in mind, it's time to go to our kind volunteer who has asked us to use a Trebuchet to help reunite him with his friend. And here we are. Hello, lovely volunteer. Okay, back to your friend. So, let's see how close we can get you in a single launch from our Trebuchet. So, we will set this up. For control, we'll set it up so that the fulcrum of the Trebuchet is right where the Korok is now, and see how far past that point we get it by launching it. So, fulcrum goes right there. Korok goes there. Alright. Any final, any words before the test? I need to reach my friend. Okay, those will be noted for posterity. And let's get ready to launch. Whee! Oh, that is very good distance. Ah, almost half the way there in a single launch. Brilliant. Alright, I like how this is going. So, one more launch should be enough to get there, but I'll leave that for another time. For now, I want to see what else we can do with our Trebuchet. Can we launch Link with it? Let's give it a go. So, we'll definitely need to reset the triggering mechanism so we can get up there while it's stable. Ooh, looks like we've lost one of the sleds. Yeah, it seems to have broken off and just disappeared. We'll give it a go without that. Let's just see what happens. So, this one's going to be a little bit tricky. We'll have to be quick in getting up. Let's prime our ascend. Shoot off a fire arrow. And here we go. Ooh. The wind seems to catch Link a lot more quickly than the Korok, so we don't end up going as far. Interesting. Okay. So, let's clear some space here for one final test. It was requested to check it out with a wing to see how far a wing will travel when launched from our Trebuchet. So, let's give that a try. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's take out our wing. So, the question here is, how do we want to set the wing up? If we put it like this, it's horizontal now, but once this rotates up, the wing will be pointed downwards. Now, can we balance it upright like that? No, it'll fall over. So, I can think of two things we can do. One is attach a stabilizer to the wing to keep it upright. That will add weight to it and might not actually work that well. Yeah, okay, so if we put it there, it tips out easily. So I think we're gonna have to do this horizontally and put it just barely balanced in so that once it starts going up, hopefully it'll catch the air and stay roughly horizontal. So, let's have a go, see how this works. Yeah, fire's a bit low, but let's hope for the best. Ooh. Nope, the wing didn't fly off of it. That's unfortunate. Okay. Now, let's try it once more with the stabilizer on the wing and see what that does. And maybe we can also line up the fire a bit better. We'll give the stabilizer a little ride. Now, the stabilizer will stop working if we're too far away from it, so we might actually have to go for a ride ourselves in order for this to work properly. So, let's set up Ascend again, shoot off a fire arrow to trigger it. And let's get ready to go. Oh, we're too heavy. Oh. Yeah, we're not going to go very far. Even if I did remember to turn the stabilizer on. Okay, well. As with last episode, there's one solution that never fails when we want to launch something. Rockets. So, as soon as our Trebuchet gets going, we'll trigger the stabilizer and the rockets, and have a fun liftoff. With a bit more fine-tuning, I'm sure we could come up with a design that doesn't break apart on the sleds each time, and if we only break the crates, it'll be a lot easier to reset. But for now, for the demonstration purposes here, I think this will be fine. Okay, let's not forget to catch all the rockets. Yep, our other Trebuchet has graciously self-destructed for us, as has part of this one. Okay, so we're definitely going to want to manually clear this out. Okay, I think I'm running out of Zonite here, so this is going to have to be our last launch. Yep, this is it. So, final launch. Any predictions on how well this is going to fare? I will remind you that my track record is very poor. But what matters isn't getting it right in the first place, it's getting it right in the end. Interestingly, these rockets keep coming unattached. I wonder if it's not just a part limit. Ooh. Yes, there is a local attachment limit. So, we didn't even get to launch here. The Trebuchet disintegrated before our eyes as soon as we started building our plane. So, anybody who predicted that, you just won big. Alright, well, I think that's about it for today's episode. I'm all out of materials, and I hope you had as much fun as I did. Now, for a final challenge, I would like to challenge any of you to improve on this design and get a trebuchet that can fire even farther than this one. Now, keep in mind, we want this to be a realistic trebuchet following the spirit of how a trebuchet works. There are, of course, plenty of ways to launch something further in Zelda. You can just attach a couple of rockets to a Korok and send it off into space. But we want a trebuchet that launches something just under gravity alone. So, try your best to see if you can improve on my design. You don't necessarily have to come up with something that looks at all like what I've done. And send in, let me know in a comment, link, send to me on Twitter at Bryan R. Gillis, that's BryanRGillis. Show me what you've got, and if I get some interesting designs, I'll show them off on the channel. So, thank you everyone for watching, and goodbye. Link, wave to the camera. Point to the camera. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and click the bell to be sure you get notifications of new uploads. See you again soon.